Hi, this is Dan Runcie, founder of Trapital, and you're listening to Your Morning Coffee, your place for weekly insights on the new music business with Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart.
For music business worldwide, Spotify is changing its royalty model to crush streaming fraud and introduce a minimum threshold for payment.
From Visual Capitalist, 50 years of music industry revenues by format.
And from music business worldwide, Spotify's price hike didn't hurt subscriptions, and 3 other things we learned on its latest earnings call. Oh, Jay, we've been just yapping for more than an hour, and we got so much to cover. We had a wonderful week. It's episode 168. Jay and I couldn't be happier that you are all here, so let's get the party started right about now.
Stand by for transmission.
This is London calling.
Wake up! The revolution is at hand!
Your morning coffee is on the air. On the air. On the air. On the air. On the air.
Standing by.
Your morning coffee, the weekly music news for the new music business. It's the highly curated, agitated, advocated, moderated, and liberated digital music information that you need to know. We are your digital music authority. And now from our studios in Hollywood, California, here's your hosts, Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart.
Rattlesnake, who do you speak of? There's a better world out there that you're keeping me from. Rattling, rattling like poison in my ears. The echoes of your voice are all I have to hear, and it goes. There's hell in the hallway. What I found, the house of the holy, always burning down. The one door closing on yesterday. One more's gonna open, but there's always hell in the hallway.
Okay, Jay, who is that? And
Wow.
that is a frickin' great song.
Yes, that is Hannah Wickland, and the song is called Hell in the Hallway. I recently saw her at the Troubadour here in Los Angeles, and she killed it. Absolutely amazing. Hannah Wickland, if you haven't heard of her before. The song Hell in the Hallway.
Great tune, great playing, and clearly someone we should be keeping an eye on.
Yes.
And boy, we had a fun week last week, didn't we?
Yeah, we got to see each other in person, which doesn't happen often enough, but you and I met up in Santa Monica for the Music Tectonics Conference.
Oh, and it was great. Great for just personally for us because we saw so many of our fellow coworkers back from our E-Labs days at Universal Music Group. And, you know, it's just, they all, Dimitri and his team do such a wonderful job of putting on this conference. And, you know, it's hard. You know, they have these little, pieces of paper up on tape to windows of what discussions and panels were happening. And you're like, I want to go to all 3.
Yeah.
I have to choose one. Yeah. And they were all excellent. And as always, I learned so much, and it's so great to be on the cutting edge and to hear what's happening from people that are doing it. It's really a blast.
Yeah, they sent out a questionnaire afterwards, sort of asking, how was your experience? And I was raving about it because it's not just about the panels, and it's not just about, all the learnings that you get, which is great, but it's, waiting in line for coffee, the people you bump into. And
yes,
it was so cool. I was sitting at this at this panel discussion, and I look out the window, and there you were talking with Lisa Ferris, Albie Galutin, Wendy
Wendy
else?
Nussbaum.
Yeah, it was so cool. Just our old team there at Universal ECAT/eLabs. That was pretty cool to get to hang out with those guys a bit.
Yeah, and of course, so much discussion about AI and all of the things surrounding it, and I mean, it's a must attend if you can possibly attend if you're in this business.
And they've been doing it for, I think this is the 5th year. And look, we were talking about AI 5 years ago, and it's been around a lot longer than that. The panel that I was watching when you were outside distracting me was. They had Wave AI, which allows you to create songs from lyric prompts. They had this company Decibel, which is really cool, and that really helps people get clearances and licenses. Melodia, again, creating songs using AI. They draw from Creative Commons, so they're not taking somebody else's body of work and drawing from it. And you and I attended a panel discussion together called Untapped Opportunities in the Music Market, with our friend Lisa Ferris from Soundtrack Your Brand. That was pretty cool.
Yes, it was. And again, it's so fun to be chatting with a lot of these people that are knee deep in it day in and day out. And I just, your brain hurts when you walk away because it's so much information going in. And then at least on my drive home, I was thinking about it the whole way. It's like, ooh, it is. So it was.
I took a lot of notes.
Because you are the perfect student, Jay.
No, because I forget stuff. So speaking of AI, you and I have been talking on the show a lot about companies that are using AI and some of the stories in the news. We talked about Warner Music. Their Spin-In Records had partnered with this startup ENDEL to create 50 of these AI-generated albums. And the same company, ENDEL, partnered with Universal, and we talked about that. And I sat down and spoke with their CEO, Oleg Stravitsky, and we had a really interesting conversation, and I want to play you a little part of that right now. This is Oleg, the CEO from ENDEL. I read a quote from you where you said that artists are starting to see AI as an opportunity, not a threat. And I know you've partnered with not only Grimes and James Blake and Miguel, but recently with Spin-In Records. So before we get into the Spin-In Records thing, tell us about ENDEL and how you sort of made this transition of not making people afraid of your technology.
I think it was just a very natural kind of evolution of what we were doing initially just ourselves. Because, as I keep saying, the work that we're doing is largely inspired by, the work of Brian Eno and, in a way, Philip Glass and Steve Reich. And, we go back. I mean, this is what we're basing kind of our fundamental artistic concept on. So naturally, at some point, we wanted to invite an artist to collaborate with us and see if they would create kind of a sound pack, a stamp pack, and we would feed that into our algorithm and see what comes out of it. As we were thinking that, we got an email from Grimes, from someone, Team Grimes, saying, hey, we would love to collaborate. So that's when, I think, when we've released AI Lullaby, this sleep soundscape back in November 2020, that changed everything for us, because we set the precedent for an artist kind of giving us a stamp pack. And Claire, obviously, and Grimes, she was, I think, kind of a perfect candidate for that. Obviously, she's very, very brave. She's not afraid of embracing this new technology. So when we released AI Lullaby and everyone saw what's possible, that kind of paved the way for all of the collaborations that followed.
Yeah, and you've had some good ones. Last time we talked, you had announced a collaboration with Universal, and then just recently, Warner's Spin-In Records. Talk about that collaboration.
Yeah, that's a big one, and that's a little bit different, right? Because what we've been doing so far is we've been working with individual releases, and we've been turning these individual releases into soundscapes, like what we did with Black earlier this year and others. And with Chad Lawson, just very recently kind of reimagined his album as a meditation soundscape. But here, Spinning, they have a massive catalog. And what they've done is they've opened the floodgates of all of that catalog, and they've sent us the stems from hundreds and hundreds of tracks. And we've reimagined these tracks as 50 functional soundscapes that are, brand new. So we've used all of the stems from their catalog, but we've created a new IP that is called Cosmos. And we're now rolling out these 50 soundscapes, like we're dropping 2 soundscapes every week. And that rollout is going to continue until the end of this year. So that's what's happening, right? Like here, it's essentially new IP that is being created using our technology from this massive catalog.
Right. How do you describe ENDEL and soundscapes to someone that's maybe not tech savvy, or somebody from a music company that you're speaking with, to get them to understand what it is and how it can benefit them?
It's very, very simple. I'm telling them, look, we can help you break into the functional music market, which by now everyone knows how big it is. The music industry has been ignoring, I think, this functional music space for a very, very long time. And for a very, very long time, it was growing. And now everyone understands that it's a massive, massive category. We're talking tens of billions of streams every month. And most of that content is not artist-driven. Most of that content is not major label content. It's something else. We're talking rain sounds and ocean sounds and even dishwasher sounds. So what I'm saying is, hey, we will take your music and we will turn that into kind of a high quality, premium, scientifically engineered soundscape that is designed to serve a particular function. It's going to help people focus, relax, sleep, but it's going to have your DNA in it. And people go like, sure.
Yeah. Well, continued success, Oleg. We'll be watching the journey and cheering from the sidelines. Congratulations on all the progress that you've made.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Wow. If that doesn't get you thinking, it's
a new world, man.
It's a new world.
And by the way, you and I were talking before we hit record, they create these things called soundscapes. And for those that have never heard one or don't know what they're talking about, I want to drop in a little bit of audio from a soundscape so you can get a sense of what they're doing. This is Roberta Flack, Killing Me Softly, and this is a soundscape created by ENDEL. Listen in.
There, you can hear parts of it, and you and I were we're talking about this before we hit record today, and it's we both are, of course, passionate music fans, and we were talking about how it's really hard. Like I can watch my daughters study, and they'll have music blasting in their ears. I can't do a damn thing when I have music blasting in my ears, because I'm listening to the parts, I'm listening to the composition, I'm listening to lots of different things. It's really hard for me to go passive as opposed to active listening. And this is such an interesting thing because it's got elements of the song that you recognize, but it doesn't force you to be an active listener. And it's fascinating. And it's almost like training your brain a little bit to switch off, but not completely off.
Well, you just hit it on the head, because that's what this music is for, wellness. It's for, chill. It's for relaxation. It's for a lot of things. And I see it as a new configuration in that I would love to hear some of my favorite albums as soundscapes, whether it's from the Beatles or Elton John or Cheap Trick or, Heart, whatever it is. I would love to hear those kinds of versions because, like you, the only kind of music I can listen to while I'm busy at work is something like, lo-fi hip hop that doesn't distract me. I'm lean back. It's just more of a painting in the background. But if I put on something with words and solos and those types of things, I'll want to focus on that, and that doesn't work for me, and just like you, my kids, they can listen to music with words as they study and as they do things. I can't do that.
My limited brain is not wired that way. Well, and I, of course, all of this, I hearken back to the great Brian Eno. He had music for airports in the early 70s. I can't remember exactly what year that came out. But, and that was kind of his idea, these sort of soundscapes that aren't necessarily music, but they are music. It's just a different kind of music than a traditional song that we all grew up with. And to see it expanded, and of course it brings up so many artistic questions, it brings up business questions, it brings up lots of different angles to this that we heard about at Music Tectonics. And, again, these were big parts of discussions that were happening there that made it so darn fascinating. And it really turns your head around. But it's coming. With all these deals that are happening.
That's right. And we're going to talk a little bit in one of the stories today about how Spotify is changing the rules of how they pay out. And that's going to affect not soundscapes, but certainly some of these companies that are putting out rain sounds and white noise and things like that. So we'll get to that in a second. But before we do, a couple of things. One is next week, we talked to Howie Singer. He has written a book that we talked about with Bill Rosenblatt called Key Changes, the 10 Times Technology Transformed the Music Industry. And you and I just absolutely love this book. It is one of the best. These guys have really done their research. They've gotten to some minutia and some details that maybe you hadn't read before. But we're going to ask Howie about the book this coming week. So stay tuned for that. And then the last thing before we jump in is I just want to give a shout out to Storm Glore and his wonderful class at UC Denver. I got to sit in with them this last week and speak with them. And better than anyone, it's a passion of mine working with colleges, working with students. And it was the highlight of my week was working with Storm in his class. So special shout out to the music business class at UC Denver with Storm Glore.
Well, and there's an enthusiasm and energy you feed on when you talk to students, right? And they're just beginning their journey in this business that we've been around for quite some time, and it's really fun, and I can see the joy in your face when you talk about it.
Yeah, and then you and I were talking before we hit record about, well, what are these students, these young people who are graduating from college and they're attending these music business programs? Where are they going? What do they want to do? And I can just tell you from this class, Storm had the students in the chat sort of say what they were going for, what they were studying. And a lot of it was music marketing, but it was really all over the map. Really cool thing. The other thing that was really buzzing this week, and man, we got a lot of emails about this. Last week, we talked about a new Billboard indie chart rule from Luminate. You remember Luminate? It used to be MRC Data, SoundScan. It's Luminate. It is the point of reference for sales, streams, downloads for the music industry, and they're adopting some new rules for indies. And I'm telling you, the indies are up in arms because if this change goes into place as planned, about 95% of the indies sales will drop right off. They're not going to be counted because right now, and we'll get into it in a second, they're extrapolating that. So there was a piece in Hypebot, and the headline was A2IM demands 75% adoption before Luminate shifts Billboard indie charts data collections. So, echoing the concerns of indie music stores and labels over plans by Luminate to change how it calculates physical sales reported to Billboard. A2IM, that's the American Association of Independent Music, in case you don't know, they're calling for a pause until store adoption exceeds 75%, not 5%. Wow. Luminate's plan centers on moving from the current reporting, which really takes sales from a sampling of stores and applies weighting to calculate total indie physical sales, to actual sales reported by approved indie retailers.
And many observers believe that if the new Billboard charts are launched with the current 5 to 12% store adoption, as much as 95% of indie retail sales will go unreported. Unless at least 75% of Luminate's 642 identified shops are onboarded and reporting repeatedly, durably, and with troubleshooting behind them, the weighted data modeling must continue, wrote Dr. Richard James Burgess, MBE. He's A2IM's president and CEO.
Yeah, he also wrote that the only acceptable adjustment plan is one that relies on robust and transparent data as the foundation for ending data modeling. That's that weighting we were talking about. Until at least 75% of Luminate's 642 identified record shops are onboarded and reporting repeatedly, durably, and with that troubleshooting behind them, the weighted data modeling, it must continue. By the way, indie coalitions estimate the number of independent record shops at anywhere between 1,100 and 1,600.
So anything less undermines Luminate's stated commitment to objective and trustworthy information. It compromises their product and disenfranchises independent labels and shops alike. This is the baseline. A truly thorough process would, in our view, also include the following. Number one, a transparent and publicly available rubric for what constitutes eligibility for a shop to report.
Right. And number two, support knowledge-based resources for record shops that are thorough, transparent, easily accessible, and proactively provided to retailers without an account or paywall obstacle.
Number three, meaningful reciprocal resources for shops. This recognizes that retailers are provided no compensation despite the time and labor costs required to onboard and report, and in recognition that this work supports Luminate's bottom line. We feel strongly this should be brokered between Luminate and the store's coalitions.
Yeah, so it's not a simple fix. Luminate on one side is saying, look, we've given you the tools, we've given you the time. We need you to get these stores on board, but it's not that easy. A lot of these are mom and pop shops, and they don't have the manpower, or they're busy selling music. So I like what A2IM is saying is like, look, let's just pump the brakes on this a little bit. Let's get the adoption a little bit more, so it's a little bit more accurate, and so everything just doesn't fall off the cliff. But yeah, it was a really interesting piece by our friend Bruce Houghton over there at Hypod.
Well, and this really highlights, though, the growing pains of new technologies and of new processes. And again, you're talking about, it's not like your Tower Records where you can just kind of dictate from the top that everybody do something. And we talked about this last week as well. We saw this when the switch over in 1991 to SoundScan. It was, to say that we're growing pains was an understatement. There was just lots and lots of action happening. So interesting, and it will get worked out, but it is a slow and torturous process sometimes.
Yeah, it is. So we're going to jump into our stories, but the first one from Music Business Worldwide, the headline, Spotify is changing its royalty model to crush streaming fraud and introduce a minimum threshold for payment. But as we jump into that, Mark Mulligan, he had a piece on Media that really sets this up beautifully. And he talks about what they're calling a two-tier licensing. And he said that it's about to become a reality. He wrote that streams may have all been created equal, but now some streams are becoming more equal than others. Right now, streams and revenue are effectively synonymous. But by this time next year, they will mean very different things.
He says the majority of artists direct will no longer be paid for their contribution to the value of the $11.99 subscription. The estimated 10% of consumption they will generate will disappear from the streaming revenue map. They will be othered, their revenue becoming a new black box for the biggest artists to share between themselves, which means that, hey, presto, all that annoying artist direct market share suddenly gets relocated to everyone else. Reallocated, I should say.
Yeah. Oh, boy. So this two-tier system doesn't even try to turn back the clock on the rise of independence. It simply funnels the growing revenue from this cultural paradigm shift to the bigger artists who are losing share right now. If DSP, that's easy for you to say, if DSP streaming was the only game in town, then the risks of antagonizing long-tail artists, label and direct, would be relatively low, but the music consumption and creation landscapes are changing. Non-DSP streaming revenue is outgrowing DSP revenue, while creators choosing to release only non-DSP platforms is growing twice as fast as artists releasing onto DSPs.
He says perhaps it would serve bigger labels and artists well to have smaller artists and labels focus their attention elsewhere. But if they do so, then they will take audience attention and cultural capital with them. At some stage or another, that kind of shift will start to bite into DSP acquisition and retention rates, by which stage it may be too late to halt the decline.
Oof. So that leads us beautifully into this piece by Tim Ingham, founder of Music Business Worldwide, one of our favorite sources. And I just read you the headline. In the actual story, the headline's much longer, though. It says, Spotify is changing its royalty model to crush streaming fraud and introduce a minimum payment threshold. And then it goes on to say its plan, to shift $1 billion in payouts towards, quote unquote, working artists over the next 5 years. And so they say, in short, there are three changes. And the first one is introducing a threshold of minimum annual streams before a track starts generating royalties on Spotify, in a move expected to demonetize a portion of tracks that previously absorbed 0.5% of the service's royalty pool.
Number two, financially penalizing distributors of music, labels included, when fraudulent activity is detected on tracks that they've uploaded to Spotify.
Yeah, and number three, introducing a minimum length of playtime that each non-music, quote-unquote, noise track must reach in order to generate royalties. And I thought that was really, really interesting, these changes that they're making, and not everybody's happy with it. But let's walk through them. Let's take number one, introducing a threshold of minimum streams before a track starts generating royalties on Spotify. So today, every play on Spotify over 30 seconds triggers a royalty payment. This won't be the case by early next year.
Right. It says Music Business Worldwide has confirmed that starting in Q1 2024, each track on Spotify under the DSP's new plan will have to reach a minimum number of annual streams, but starts generating royalties. That is a change.
Yeah, well, and the sources weren't willing to specify what that exact number is yet. So we'll let you know when we find that out. But that's a big change for Spotify. And number two, financially penalizing distributors of music, labels included, when fraudulent activity is detected on music that they've uploaded to Spotify. So it's estimated that 10% of what's streamed today is fraudulent. And I don't know if our listeners have subscribed to Rob Abelow's really great newsletter. It's called Where Music's Going. He had a really cool thing in his newsletter this week. He said, why is Spotify making these changes? And he said 100 million tracks, that are up, 120,000 on average uploaded every day, 30 seconds to earn a royalty, up to 10% of streams are frauds. AI only makes this harder. And he said the system is outdated and has been gamed. Real artists pay the price. So I think it is time to make some changes, and it's going to be a little bumpy.
Yes, as all these things are a little bumpy. But this is what we've been talking about for a very long time. And it looks like they're actually putting pen to paper and, kind of drawing a line in the sand, it's probably high time that this happens.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we'll watch some of these things really closely to see how they affect the financials, of Spotify streaming. What's interesting is that this was sort of announced with Universal and Deezer, and then all of a sudden this kind of came hot on the heels of it. It was like they were dipping their toe in the water, and then all of a sudden, boom, it's happening. And number 3 is introducing a minimum length of time that non-music noise tracks must reach in order to generate royalties. So today we've seen a number of notable cases, makers of what they call non-music noise content, things like white noise, beats, whale songs, things like that. They get paid as the same as every other creator on Spotify. And one of the things I thought was really interesting in Rob Abelo's email is he had a graph that showed rain sounds, 30 seconds, and gets paid the same royalty as Stairway to Heaven by Led Zeppelin at 8 minutes and 2 seconds.
Oh my goodness. It says from Q1 2024, we, meaning Music Business Worldwide, has confirmed Spotify is planning to significantly elongate the minimum unit of time that each track of non-music audio content must meet before a payout is triggered. Well, there you have it. That just lays it out right there. And
yeah,
I mean, it's when you start talking about art or music in this case, obviously, and you start attaching these kind of criteria of what is and what is not, it is a very muckety place to be. And I really tip my hat for them to kind of laying down some ground rules, but it is really fraught with lots of just pushback and issues. But you know what? We are stepping into it, and it's about time. It's work that has needed to be done for a good long while, and it's nice to see that.
And any system that you create, people are going to try to game it. So in this case, people have taken these rain sounds and they break them up into 31-second bite-sized chunks because that triggers the royalty. And it's about time we took a look at, well, is that fair? Let's have these different tiers, and I'm all for it. Music Business Worldwide has yet to confirm with their sources exactly what that minimum unit of time will become. But Tim points out in this article, let's for the sake of a helpful example, let's say it's 4 minutes. In that scenario, a playlist of white noise tracks, currently at 31 seconds each, would, in order to qualify for Spotify monetization, they'd have to be taken down and split into 4-minute long tracks and then uploaded. So it's going to be interesting to see how that happens along that stuff, especially as we're talking about not necessarily songs or soundscapes that we were talking about from ENDEL, because those are actual songs, actual tracks, track length, but there's so much sound effects, rain sounds, chill stuff, AI created, chill music up there that's in those bite-sized chunks. And if these rules go into effect, I can see them all being pulled down and re-uploaded into, royalty-bearing sizes.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be a fascinating space to watch, and we will continue to watch it. And Jay, before we jump on to our next story, let's have out a big thank you to our sponsors. Oh my goodness, we could not.
I'm so glad you remembered. Yeah, starting off with Your Morning Coffee podcast is brought to you by our friends at Bandzoogle. Built by musicians for musicians, Bandzoogle is an all-in-one platform, and it makes it super easy to build a beautiful website and EPK for your music. I've built a half dozen websites using Bandzoogle, and if a knucklehead like me can do it, anybody can do it. It's got all the features you need for a beautiful website. Everything's built in: hosting, custom domain name, dozens of fully customizable design templates, tools to help you sell your music and merch commission-free crowdfunding and fan subscription features, mailing list tools to grow your fan list and send newsletters, social media integrations, and live support from their musician-friendly team 7 days a week. Your Morning Coffee podcast listeners can go to bandzoogle.com, try it for free for 30 days. Just use the promo code Morning Coffee, all one word, Morning Coffee. That'll get you 15% off your first year of any subscription. That's bandzoogle.com, promo code Morning Coffee.
And we also have a new sponsor, Miko. Discover Miko, your ultimate music companion. Enjoy weekly Zoom sessions and professional assistance with Miko bios, press releases, and pitches. Access comprehensive databases connecting you with key industry influencers at Spotify, TikTok, music blogs, radio, and more. Stay ahead of the game with regular industry updates and receive immediate support via WhatsApp, and thrive within our vibrant community of passionate musicians. Go to www.themiko.com for more information.
Yeah, and thanks to Hypebot. Since 2004, Hypebot has chronicled the new music industry and the trends and technologies that are changing how music is discovered, consumed, marketed, and monetized. Edited daily by founder Bruce Houghton with help from Alana Bonilla, Hypebot and sister blog Music Think Tank are published by live music and discovery and marketing platform Bands in Town. And I just noticed it said since 2004, so they're going to come up on their 20th anniversary pretty soon. We're going to have to do something special for our friends over at Hypebot.
Absolutely. And speaking of Bands in Town, over 80 million live music fans trust Bands in Town to get personalized concert alerts, recommendations, and messages from their favorite artists. It's the #1 artist service platform connecting over 590,000 artists with their superfans. Managers, labels, agencies, and artists access their own dashboard to manage and promote their tour dates across all platforms.
Yes, and finally, the Music Business Association. They host an annual slate of in-person and virtual events, so industry professionals across the world can come together to discuss hot-button issues and support the growth of the entire music business community. Join us at the conference, the Music Biz 2024 conference, May 13th through the 16th in Nashville at the JW Marriott. I will be there, and we're looking forward to seeing you.
Yes, indeed. Big thanks to Bandzoogle, Miko, Hypebot, Bands in Town, and the Music Business Association. Boy, we certainly appreciate it, and we could not do it without them.
Yes, sir.
And let's jump over to the #2 story, Jay. This one was another one. This is 50 years of music industry revenues by format. It's from Visual Capitalist, and you and I love these things that people spend so much time doing. Oh my God, this is beautiful. A beautiful chart. Just, oh my God. I will let you start it, but I'm just going to sit here and oogle it for a bit. It's gorgeous.
The graphics that they use in here are just stunningly beautiful, and at a glance you can sort of see how it goes from vinyl, 8-track, cassette, CD, MP3, streaming, all of that stuff, and it's really cool. But what I thought was really interesting that you don't typically see is this was adjusted for inflation.
Yes.
And that was a really key point. So this is 50 years of music industry revenues by format. And they jump in and say, in this ever-changing world of music, in 2022, it marked another milestone. For the 7th year in a row, recorded music revenues in the United States rose, hitting a high of $15.9 billion. And so this graphic that they have here uses data from the RIAA to kind of chart the growth.
Right, and they start, of course, with the analog era, vinyl to cassettes to CDs, starting in the 70s, 1970s through the 1990s, and talking about, of course, the big hits of the 70s. And, of course, as we hit 1990, we saw the arrival of the biggest game changer of the 20th century, digital music and compact discs. And if you look at this chart, it is dramatic how much more revenue, again, adjusted for inflation, we're talking about compact discs have $367 billion.
Well, they were so expensive, especially in the beginning.
Yes.
And in this piece, they say that because of the significant jump in capacity and audio quality compared to, let's say, cassettes, the CD quickly became the leader in sales, peaking around 1999-2000 with global sales estimated at $2.5 billion.
It goes on to say, amid the growth of digital music, ringtone and ringback revenues also reached an impressive $1.1 billion in 2007, constituting, get this, 10% of the music industry's earnings for that year. At the same time, digital music allowed consumers to purchase cheaper individual songs instead of full albums and made piracy easier and more widespread, cutting into sales. We were there. We remember that. But, I remember sitting in meetings and just talking about ringtones and how...
Oh, me too.
unbelievably
Mastertones.
impressive. Yeah.
Because some of them, they would use the music from the master itself, and others, they just kind of recreate it on a keyboard or something, you know.
Yes.
And then they go on to say that changing the sound of music over the last 20 years, streaming, of course, took over the music industry. Digital music revenues, you know, from streaming comprised 89% of the U.S. music industry's revenue in 2022. Services like Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Music made up 84% of the total industry revenue. So the number of paid subscriptions to on-demand services surged past 92 million that year, showcasing the continued appetite for music.
Well, and you know, you look at a graph like this, and it's pretty remarkable. Going back to 2018, 46.9 million people had paid music subscriptions, which is a pretty darn good number. But then here we are for last year, 92 million, and
wow.
that is pretty remarkable. And it says in here, for the third consecutive year, our friend Bad Bunny was the most streamed artist, 18.5 billion streams. That's followed by Taylor Swift, Drake, The Weeknd, and BTS. That is a lot of streams.
Yeah, it sure is. And then the last part of this is the vinyl renaissance. You know, while digital music has continued to ascend, that doesn't necessarily mean that the end of the physical format. Vinyl sales, for example, also grew in 2022. You know, we're seeing that in cassettes and CDs too. That, you know, we thought that they were sort of going down, and then they sort of blip back up, and that's partially because of some of the releases and record store day and some of these things. But people, they still like physical things.
Well, and you know, you when your power goes out or when you're traveling on a flight, you suddenly realize it's like, wait a minute, you know, you have to make some plans to have music to listen to sometimes. But yeah, and you know, I think both you and I are similar. We still have our collections, although I'm sort of dwindling mine down a little bit because I realize I have too much physical product actually in my garage and in my house. But you know, there are certain things I want to own still, and I don't see that in my kids. They have no interest in owning, and yet so that must be a generational thing for sure. But
I think some of it they do like to own vinyl, whether they play it or not. You know, Will Page said that 60% of vinyl, you know, is purchased by people without a turntable. And I think they like to have something signed at the merch table. And, you know, physical is still, for young people, that part of it is pretty cool. But I don't really buy CDs much, but I do still buy vinyl. But as we talked about before, it's such a different experience. Before we jump into the third story, which is talking about Spotify's price hike, they really broke it down really well in a Billboard piece. The headline was Spotify turns profit, adds 6 million subscribers in Q3 following price hikes and cost cuts. And I wanted to they had a really good recap, some bullet points, and I'll try to go slow because sometimes you and I get too caffeinated and we get too excited and we jump into these things. So I'm going to kick it off. You know, we're going to look at their kind of synopsis of this whole thing. So number one, monthly active users, MAUs, they rose by 26% to 574 million. So compared to the third quarter of 2022, that was beating their guidance by over 2 million. So monthly active users now 574 million.
So the number of subscribers rose by 16% to 226 million from the year ago. For the year ago period, also ahead of guidance by 2 million.
Ad-supported monthly active users, so you know that's people who aren't paying that monthly subscription fee, that rose 32% to 361 million from a year ago.
Total revenue rose 11% to 3.36 billion euros, which is about $3.57 billion, up from 3.04 billion euros from last period.
Yeah, so total revenue, that's good. Revenue from premium subscriptions rose 10% to almost 3 billion euros, which is a little over $3 billion.
And revenue from ad-supported users rose 16% to 447 million euros or $475 million.
Yeah. Operating income overall, operating income, that was 32 million euros or $34 million. And that was boosted by higher gross margin and lower personnel and marketing costs.
Indeed. And the company's gross margin was 26.4% compared to 24.7% in the third quarter of 2022. So that is the nitty gritty right there.
Absolutely. So that leads us beautifully into our last story, which is from Music Business Worldwide, written by Daniel Tenser. Really great piece. Headline was Spotify's price hike didn't hurt subscriptions, and 3 other things we learned on its latest earnings call.
Yeah, as they said in this article, efficiency is Spotify's new mantra. And the music streaming company says its focus on cost cutting will mean better profit margins going forward. They say, Daniel X said, a new part of the Spotify modus operandi is our focus on efficiencies. He says, Paul Vogel and myself and the rest of the management team are constantly looking at how we can make improvements, and we're constantly finding new ways to bring more efficiencies out of the business.
Yeah, so let's dive into the 3 things that they learned on this earnings call. Number 1, Spotify's price increase didn't cause cancellations, and there will be more hikes. Spotify was the last holdout among major streaming services to resist raising its subscription prices, much to the consternation of music companies. The company's strategy thus far has been to build up as large a customer base as possible, capturing market share and ensuring a large revenue stream, right? So keeping subscription rates low made sense in that context, but with inflation running hot in recent years, the business licensing music to Spotify were beginning to ask for more.
Right. He said for Spotify, the major fear was loss of paying customers and therefore revenue, but the company's leadership was pleased to find no adverse impact from the recent price hike and even reported an acceleration in new subscriptions. Well, how about that?
Yeah, well, the fear was, right, that if you raise your prices, people are going to jump, and you didn't want to be the first one to raise your prices, and they weren't. Number 2, Spotify's AI will be a win-win for creators and consumers and will keep listeners engaged. So like many other media and music businesses, Spotify is cautiously experimenting with artificial intelligence technologies. The company soft launched the AI DJ tool. Remember that earlier with Xavier Jernigan? And that marketed bespoke digital radio DJ that acts as a personalized AI guide that knows you and your musical taste, sort of talks to you and can help you choose what kind of music that you play. And that tool was really expanded globally last August.
They also, interestingly enough, unveiled a new voice translation tool for podcasts that can translate shows into additional languages in what sounds like the podcaster's own voice. And you and I've read that and we're like, oh, that's pretty interesting, isn't it? Yeah. Go ahead, sorry.
Well, I was going to say, I would love to do that with our podcast. I would love to have our podcasts in every different language. And now with AI technology, that's not just a dream. You can actually make that happen. And then the third one here is Spotify's audiobook service already has fans and will be a boost to the book industry. And you and I are big fans of audiobooks. A key part of Spotify's plan is to raise its value to price ratio. Well, what is that? That expands its offerings beyond music. Despite the difficulties experienced with live audio, because they had layoffs, the company is running full steam ahead with plans to become a one-stop shop for audiobooks.
They go on to say, we're encouraged with what we're seeing, and the most important thing is when you think about the consumers that are trying out the experience, they're loving it and they're finding it a really natural part of the Spotify experience and a great value add, said Daniel Ek about Spotify's first year in audiobooks, adding that you're definitely going to see us expand audiobooks. So that'll be, but again, is this kind of the shiny penny? And, remember podcasts were the future 2 years ago, maybe. So
for their business,
for their business, that's right. So they've kind of, moderated that sort of enthusiasm for podcasts. And now we're talking audiobooks. We'll see, and you and I've talked about the back end of that. What is that like? And I'm not entirely sure. And I've asked a couple of people that are in the book the book publishing business, and they say, it's all over the map. So many things depend on it. Which publisher you're dealing with, and how
sort
big
of the wild west, right?
It is, yeah. So it's really hard to get I found it hard to get some concrete data on that. But again, there's costs associated with audiobooks. So we'll see. Again, this is we'll see. But these are pretty impressive numbers on this call.
I'd like to see audiobooks evolve. I think the book we talked about a while back, Bono's autobiography, the way that they included music in each chapter, and I know that's difficult to do because you have to get the publishing cleared for that, but he did it, and it was absolutely amazing. And I was reading the Spitz book on the Beatles, and as he's describing these different eras, I just wish that as I'm listening that I could hear some of that to bring it all in. And I'm hoping that that's one of those chasms that can be bridged at some point. And the last thing I'll say on this piece is that, Daniel Ek said that podcasting, the business, is a much bigger global business because Spotify is a part of that business now. And we're going to have the same benefit on the audiobook side, which will be great for authors and great for consumers. So yes, they did invest heavily into podcasts, and they've faced criticism that those investments may have been too steep, but it's still early, right? We're seeing streaming grow and grow and grow, and it's all evolving and changing, and Spotify is innovating. But look, it's all good.
It's all good. It is all good. And on that note, we need to wrap it up, Jay. This is going to have to call it quits on episode 168. We do want to thank our sponsors, Bandzoogle, Miko, Hypebot, Bands in Town, and the Music Business Association, and the ninja of digital music, my good friend, Jay Gilbert. Thanks, brother. And thanks for listening, everyone. We will be back next week, Jay and I, on the Your Morning Coffee podcast.
You've been listening to Your Morning Coffee, the weekly music news program for the new music business. Join Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart next time for the digital music news you need to know.